It's hard to say how many murals there are. I would take a guess to say that at any one time throughout the north there are 300 to 400. It's in constant flux. The very first mural was painted in 1908 in the Beersbridge Road by a shipyard worker called John McLean, and it depicted King Billy at the Battle of the Boyne. So it actually ends up being the longest extant mural tradition in the world. I'm Bill Rolston. I'm an academic, but I'm also a mural hunter. I've been photographing murals, not just here in Northern Ireland, but across the world since 1981. The important thing to remember about the murals is that first and foremost, they have been directed inwards at communities. They're propaganda. They're unashamedly propaganda. In fact, many of the people who paint the murals are proud to be known as propagandists because they can put quite complex messages across remarkably simply. I mean, it was one of the great Mexican muralists who said that for a mural to work, you should be able to understand it at first view. The history of the last 10-15 years has been to try to persuade the groups to change their images on the walls. Why the boss in East Belfast has taken the head staggers, I'm not quite sure. I think it's partly about the whole argument about flags, about parades, about what a lot of Unionists and Loyalists refer to as the culture wars that are going on at the moment. This is not a gut reaction. This is a planned political decision to put the old images back up on the wall. Basically, there's a whole element of saber rattling going on there. On the Loyalist side, since 1986, the murals are commissioned by whichever paramilitary boss is in control in the area. On the Republican side, it was never that confined. Republicanism, for lots of reasons, is a broader political ideology than loyalism. So some murals were sponsored by the IRA, some would be sponsored by Republican feminists, Republican socialists, support groups for Cuba or South Africa or Palestine. So technically, on the Republican side, you can go paint a mural tomorrow morning if you want. Somebody else might paint it out tomorrow night if they don't like it, but at least you'll have done it. These people who paint the murals are not trained. They're not trained artists. In fact, in the early days, many of them were self-taught in prison. In terms of technique, some of these murals are just absolutely brilliant, and so it's remarkable to think that they are in fact amateur. Sometimes there's a lot less skill. There's frequent stories told. I've had one example myself, but other people will tell you about encounters with young muralists in particular and saying to them, why are you painting all those people with hoods? And the answer is, because I can't paint faces. The problem for the Loyalists has been, if we don't paint hooded men, who do we paint? Or what do we paint? And some of the answers to that have been about history, and especially the history of war, whether it's the Boyne or the Somme, or the First World War in general, or the Second World War, or now Iraq and Afghanistan. The UVF, the Ulster Volunteer Force, claims sort of descent from the original UVF. In fact, they don't. There was the original UVF disappeared in 1920, and the new UVF wasn't formed until 1965. But the connection allows them to paint murals like this. The UVF joined the British Army as the 36th Ulster Division and were sent to the Somme. And on the 1st of July 1916, they went over the top into withering gunfire from German forces. It was said that there wasn't a single Unionist home on the island of Ireland where they didn't know somebody killed or injured at the Somme. So it's a really crucial element to the Unionist identity, I think. But because the UVF shares the same name, they get to paint a lot about the First World War. Probably the most famous anti-war mural of all time, or anti-imperial war mural of all time, was Picasso's Guernica, painted after the destruction of Guernica by the Luftwaffe. So I think it's one of the reasons why, in the middle of the peace process, it's very appropriate that it was painted, copied on a wall in West Belfast. It's the first of a lot of murals now that have been painted jointly by a Republican and Loyalist muralist together. So in that way, as in other ways, it's a pretty good symbol for the peace process that they were able to work together on that. I think that the bottom line of the re-imaging programme was to get the offensive murals off the wall, and sometimes to me that became the main reason, and the artistic value of some of the replacements have not been that great, to tell you the honest truth. And especially, this is my own personal belief, especially what they call the digital murals. They don't do it for me in the same way that the paint on the wall does, and I suspect that they don't really do it for local people in the same way. If we go back to the point I made, the Mexican muralist who said, for a mural to work you should see right away what it's trying to say to you. Some of the digital ones are too cluttered, too wordy to actually have an impression first time. The paradox of this image of the UVF is that this is a peacetime mural. I think we're at a point where there's a confrontation between two sorts of views. Do we go forward or do we go back? Paradoxically, it may be that this is the last kick of a tradition and we're moving into something else.